I think the point, believe it or not, was working for my grandfather when I was 12 at his bagel store because I got paid. And I was like, you know what? He'd pay me in cash.
Yeah.
And then I'd go out and buy something.
And that's the first job?
And I wouldn't have to ask my parents.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would save money and I would save cash. And you know what? You found out that getting paid is a really good thing.
Getting paid is an awesome thing.
And you know what? That got me hungry. And that's what started my whole, before entrepreneurship was considered like what it is now. I guess looking back between that and my businesses I did in college and other things, it's like getting paid is really good.
Getting paid is really good. I mean, there's nothing to be wrong with making money. I feel like people are scared of it sometimes, to be quite honest. But
they are. But I do so much charity work on top of it.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about with my junior achievements and my United Negro college funds and all this other stuff that I do. I believe that you have to even it out. It's important because not only for your mindset, but it's giving back is the most important thing. I teach in all my classes that one kid once said to me, he goes, how do you know you made it? What's the number? I go, 1. And he goes, what do you mean 1? I go, change one person's life. And that, to be honest with you, was better than any dollar I've ever made. But to be able to make the money and change people's lives at the same time,
did you have that mindset your whole life? Like
I did.
Even when you're hungry, like even when you're young in college, because some people get super selfish. They get greedy and they're like, oh, I'm working my ass off in college, or not. I'm building a business, whatever it is. And like the first version of life for a lot of people is make as much money as humanly possible, and they forget the other stuff. I was
like that, especially in the trading days, because every day was a blank P&L, and I only traded my own money. So when you only trade your own money, it gives you a much different view than someone that trades other people's money. But that's also why I was able to do some of the things that I did. Like my network is so extensive because when I went out with people, they knew there was never an ask. That I could never ask. It wasn't like, some of these financial advisors are like, by the end of the night, oh, by the way, let me look at your portfolio. So I am, I'm a consigliere through, some very wealthy people because they know that I don't ask anything. If I'm doing something and they're interested in it, that's great. But early on when I had that hunger, for the money, for making money, I also always was very, very clear about the people around me because I grew up in an average Long Island household. My father, who is a mathematical genius and had skipped 3 grades, was when he found commodities, he was 38 and broke. And then he just happened to find the best business for his mathematical skills and became chairman of the exchange and one of the biggest silver traders in the world and things like that. But so I grew up in a very, normalized situation as opposed to a lot of the people these days. So a lot of people these days, they're in a situation where they're so affluent, that they lose all respect for cash.
I think that people are affluent, but also there's like a fake middle class where you think you have a lot, but in all seriousness, a lot of the things that you're using every day are just they're just cheaper and more accessible.
Right. And they're borrowed, by the way.
And they're all borrowed and leased and rented and the car and the house.
Once I started doing well, I never had a mortgage. Because people are like, well, I remember one time when I did my first house, she's like, well, I said, well, I got 6 or 7, I'm covered. So if something happens, she goes, okay, you got 6 or 7 months of, and I'm like, no, I could do this payment for 6 or 7 years. And she's like, well, why don't you buy a bigger house? I'm like, I don't need a bigger house. And that's the thing. I mean, what I found is that, especially as a trader, that you wanted to always have what you could pay for because you didn't want to ever be in a position that in a bad year, bad month, or bad whatever, that your family would have to suffer.
That's so interesting.
So I had a whole lecture on living below the radar. Because
I know, so I watched some of your stuff, and I want to go into some of the lectures because there's a really good point to bring out. But that's an interesting mindset to have because a lot of people that are in the finance space, and traders are in finance, a lot of them live in debt. Massive amounts of debt.
Massive.
Right? So you have like between the Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad versus like the Dave Ramsey, 2 polar opposites. Right. Where a lot of people
I knew one trader that at the end of every quarter, he goes, I have to have a good quarter. I'm like, why? He says, well, I have to make my money for my taxes. I'm like, what? He goes, well, I spend everything I make the first 3 quarters. I said, what happens if you have a losing quarter? He's like, well, then I'm screwed. But what I always did was every $100,000 I took out of my account, I put 40 away for taxes, so I overpaid my tax account. I took 30 into savings that I wouldn't touch, and I would live on that 30. I'd work on that 30. So, I was always, I was so conservative in what I spent. I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't
responsible.
Yeah, I didn't, it goes back to when, first of all, my father taught me, very early on to respect money. No matter how much money you have, you got to always respect it. And when I got that, that cash from my grandfather and I put it in my cigar box, right? And then the cash went out, it hurt at the same time. It felt good that you did it, but you saw that it went in and out. So I was always very conservative. I was a medium-sized trader. If I was less conservative, I might have made more trading because I would have been a bigger trader and more comfortable with the risk. However, at the same time, I might have blown it faster.
Yeah, I mean, there's always both potential outcomes. I know
traders that were so big and so wealthy and are so broke right now, because it was it was about the 10,000 square foot houses and this, that. Yeah. I mean, there's a great story that when we went public and a guy came up to me and it was I hated him, and my daughter was near me and he goes, "So you're going to buy a Ferrari?" So I said, you know what the best thing about being able to buy a Ferrari is? He goes, "What?" I go, "Not buying one." So then years later, so I ended up looking at an Aston Martin, right? And it was the DB9 convertible, blue and Bentley leather. It was gorgeous. I'm not paying that for a car. So about 5 years later, my friend calls me up. He goes, "I found your car. Same car, 100,000, and I'm like, "I'm not paying 100,000 for a used car." He goes, "Go to the guy's house." I go to the guy's house and it's this massive estate. Equestrian, everything. And I walk in, I go, "What's the story?" He goes, "I just caught my wife screwing the equestrian teacher." He goes, "You see that car out there?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "It's hers, but it's in my name." I just looked at him, I go, "How much?" So he goes, 70,000 if you can wire it now and get it off the property. So for that, I bought the car for 70,000. I drove it for a year and a half. I sold it for 85,000. It was,
that's not a bad deal.
To me, that was value.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But I was always very, very conservative in my spending.
So you got this from your dad, your family. Walk me through even your career journey a little bit, just to tee it up for listeners.
Oh, sure.
How did you get in? I know it makes sense you got into trading now that I know the story of your dad, but not everybody does exactly what their parents do.
No, but it was, I clerked a few summers on the trading floor in New York. And, when you were on the trading floor, I don't know if, some of your people are too young to know Trading Places or that one scene in Ferris Bueller when everything's going. But being on the trading floor, I mean, imagine this. I mean, if who's ever listening, just close your eyes for a second and think about being in a room that's 25,000 square feet wide and big with no columns, with 40-foot ceilings, with these amazing electronic wall boards all over the place where people yelling and screaming their brains out all day. And it was the biggest rush. And when you walked into that, how people talk about energy now and stuff? I mean, I don't know from energy. When you walked on that trading floor, and if you were in a bad mood, it was great. You'd go and pick a fight with somebody and rip each other apart. And it was basically, we had
it's like therapy.
No, it's therapy. It was great.
Like therapy.
I mean, there were times I wasn't trading well. My father would say, "Go down, pick a fight with somebody," and then he'd scream, "Make sure you can win." Yeah. But it was the biggest rush. So once you saw that, I was like, okay, I want to do this. But it was very important for me and my father to separate the two.
Separate the two what?
The family versus business.
Yeah.
So, and what was interesting is that, so I started off in Chicago when he was in New York. So I started out as a runner, as we were talking about, making, like $3.75 an hour. And then I remember the day that the phone clerk got into a fight with the head guy. They fired the phone clerk. They looked at me and said, "You're now the phone clerk." I went to the bathroom. I threw up because I didn't know what I was going to do. I screwed up every order. I mean, it probably cost the company more than what my salary would have been. But, it taught me on what it was like to deal with the pressure quickly. And we can talk about that, after this. But, seeing that environment and then that, it's like when you have the chance to go into something that exciting, it's either you do it or you don't.
Yeah.
Because some people did it and lasted a week and said, I don't like this.
Has that changed at all? Like that whole environment?
Oh, no, it's gone.
It's completely gone.
You were looking at the only board member in the world that voted against electronic trading, and I voted against it because one, they lied to the trading floor saying that was going to help them when I knew it was going to put them out of business. I didn't think that the compliance was ready for it. I wasn't lying to the guys on the trading floor because I was one of the floor guys. And I also was worried about what you see now. There's a clip from me from 2011 on CNBC talking about high frequency trading. And I remember what I said. I said, if you think a 400-point move is fast now, wait till you see it, in a few years from now. So what happens now is with the trading, you get these tsunami of order flows coming in each direction. So it's made trading more of a gambling situation rather than a strategic, situation. and people are just getting whipped back and forth, in these markets. So, but now there's no trading floors left. It's all gone.
Does it exist like other places in the world still, or no?
No, I mean,
not really.
Even the stock market, it's like I did an article after Superstore Sandy with Charlie Gasparino with Fox. Like they closed the stock market because they said people couldn't get there. You didn't need people to get there. There's only 10 people there anyway.
Yeah.
They have people come down when they're opening up a new product, so it looks like it's busy. But if you went to the stock market now, you have where I used to be on CNBC. You have that that set right in the middle. You couldn't have done that back in the day. So no, there's no trading. Maybe 1% of trading is done on the trading floor. And I always said those are the guys that really didn't like their wives or their girlfriends. They just don't want to be home.
No, I saw some clips, and it's just wild. I saw you like writing shit down on cards.
Oh yeah, cards. Slow and getting spit on all day, getting smacked in the head. It was awesome. It was
okay. So this is what age are you when you're doing this?
So I came right out of college. I started in Chicago.
Okay.
Literally like 2 weeks out. So what was that?
And maybe also explain the different types of exchanges, because you were one type of exchange.
Yeah,
so
we were a physical commodities exchange.
Yeah.
So the physical commodities exchange was
and that's because your dad knew that very well. And
well, no, he was actually in the silver side. So there was 4 different exchanges.
Explain this, because I don't know this as well. And
so you had COMEX. Yeah. Well, imagine this table being in the original trading floor. You had one corner was COMEX, which was gold, silver, copper.
Okay.
Another corner, which was the orange juice exchange, which was orange juice, and then you had the coffee, sugar, cocoa, which was coffee, sugar, cocoa, and then you had the New York Mercantile Exchange, which was it ended up being gas, natural gas,
Understood.
propane,
Okay.
all those things. So we ended up buying COMEX years later, and these two exchanges merged. So there's the stock market, which is for stocks, and commodities, which is for an actual physical commodity. So with my exchange, we ended up, after buying COMEX, we ended up being the exchange that did physical commodities like literal crude oil, heating oil. I mean, one day I was in New York, and the heating oil broker came to my house to sell me heating oil. So he says, knocks on the door, and he says, "Listen, this is the price." I'm like, "Hang on for a second." And he goes, "What?" I call the trading floor. I go, "No, this is the price." I go, "You literally knocked on the wrong person's house." I go, "You're not even close." So that's how that was traded.
Understood. Okay. So you do this right out of college. So walk me through career as like what's the progression of a trader? What's the career life of a trader?
It depends on how you go in. There's different ways.
And why also, just another point you mentioned before, why only your own money?
Well, for one, you made more. Okay. Too. So in the pit, there were floor brokers up. There were floor brokers on the top.
Yeah.
Think about a ring. With and they traded some of their corporate money, their money, and they did customer orders. But when you were what we called a local trader, it was like literally, you want to talk about the bastion of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Every day you put your money on the line, it was yours, and you made it, and what you made, and what you lost, you lost. I mean, these, I've got no offense to some of my friends that are financial advisors, but market goes down 1,000 points, they have to call their people up. Well, you had a bad day, but they'll still get their commission.
Yeah.
When I had a bad day, it was my bad day. You want to go home, kick the dog, and just put your head under the pillow because that was the kid's college, or that was the kid's summer camp or whatever. But there was no greater rush. So that's why when I talk to people, the first thing I say when they said they were a trader, I said, "Did you trade your own money?" Because it gives you, I think, a lot of the reasons why I have the perspectives in life that I do, not only from some of the events that I went through that we'll talk about, was that you couldn't lie to yourself as a trader.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that really drives people nuts about me, especially when I coach them and some of my friends, I said, this friend of mine, that CEO of $1 billion company, and I walk into his office, he goes, "I love this guy." He goes, "You always know where you stand," because I don't allow people to live in their little fantasy, because we couldn't. If you were long and the market was long, means you want the market going up, and the market's going down, you were losing money. You can't lie to yourself.
Yeah. Whereas you're dealing with other people's money. Well, then
it's like, just hold on. God, I love this. The market's lower, buy more. I'm like, that's adding to a bad position in my mind. Yeah, I mean, it's like now what's happening, and all these Reddit traders got destroyed.
Well, that's what I'm so curious about, because now I see these people selling investment courses and day trading on YouTube and all that. No, I know, but this is the shit that you're dealing with now, right?
And none of them have the experience that I have, and the people on the trading floor.
Yeah.
And when they're like, well, you have to remember, you had a 15-year period that every time the market came off, it bounced.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, and I would teach in my classes, guys, it doesn't have to bounce. So when they had the whole AMC thing and all the other things, were like, oh, buy the dip, buy the dip. I had this one trade, I call it my Publix pharmacy trade. And I would walk in and my Publix pharmacist would go, I got diamond hands. I go, what does that mean? He goes, we're never letting go. We're never selling. I go, what are you never selling? He goes, AMC and GameStop. So I'm like, okay, good. I go to my E-Trade account. I sell like 3,000, GameStop, He's like, what are you doing? He goes, you can't go short. That's illegal. I go, no, it's not illegal. Number one. I go, one, I'm not going short to bury the company. I'm going short because you're telling me I should buy it. So I go short, market comes off, buy it back, comes in the next day. Oh, and it bounced after I bought it back. So he goes, told you, diamond hands. I'm sell it again. I made a lot of money off my pharmacist because I said, where are you getting this information? And he's like, oh, the guy in the produce. He knows his stuff because he's following some guy on YouTube. He goes, buy every dip. And let me tell you something. You buy every dip, and it's a great way to blow yourself out. And so many people got hurt in the stock market sell-off of the past 2 years because what happens is that I teach, in my trading classes and my investing classes that you always take some profit. I love when people say, I don't want to take profit. I want to pay the taxes. And then I call them up and go, well, now you got less taxes. So, nobody knows the art of, managing your money within a position. So they buy on the way up and they buy on the way down. So you buy here and then hit the top of the triangle and you buy here. And now you're down on this and you're down on this. So when people said, stock market was down 20%, the other year, people were down 40%. On some stuff because they dollar cost averaged and it didn't work their way. And, as I said, there's a difference between adding to a position and adding to a bad position. Mm-hmm. And it's never taught the right way. And people go in and they just screw themselves over. So you got all these people online that, no offense to them, I mean, I'll go against my trading and my, statistics any day against some of these people.
But I think it's also because you have these communities pop up from crypto trading.
Oh, yeah.
And then everyone's an expert overnight.
Oh, everybody. I was on Clubhouse one night, and it was 1,200 people in the room, and this guy says, Bitcoin's going to 250,000. And I just went, why? And didn't say anything else. There was silence in the room. And he's like, what? I'm like, why? Well, there's only 23 million. That's not true anymore. He's like, what do you mean that's not true? I said, well, derivatives, and now they're trading on the CME, and now they're trading against other currencies. As a trader, I know the way these things work. Now you have a natural push on the market. It's not just a one-way market anymore. And the guy just like, but it's going to 250. I know it. And I'm like, okay. That's when it went from 60 down to, and people got crushed on that.
Wherever it is now.
Yes,
right?
30 something, but so you got, the internet and Instagram and everything, while it can do a lot of good, can do a lot of harm.
Yeah.
And you have some people out there that are telling some very young generation people some things that I think that are going to really hurt them as time goes on. And I've been deprogramming some of my friends' kids from this.
I think you have to. I mean, so to give you an example of what I see now, I see people that have meme coin Telegram groups,
right?
Where as a group they buy together because they think that somebody's going to shill and pump. I'm pretty sure that's illegal already.
Well, yeah, it's a pump and dump.
Yeah, but I mean, like, there's like groups set up for this shit, and they're advertising, like, come join my group.
Yeah, guess what? And the guy that says come join my group is selling to everybody that's buying it. Yeah. So when that thing starts popping up, he has the original number. Yeah. Right. And
but that's like malicious. There's a lot of like idiots that aren't malicious as well, right?
Yeah. No, there's just some idiots that are just trading stuff because they think it's going to work. But my question is, and this is something that the younger generation is just not getting. Listen to me carefully. Just not getting. The question is, it might work now, but what's going to work for the next 20 or 30 years? Okay, because everybody's earning potential and their powerful earning years do not last as long as they think they do. I know mine didn't. I know some really wealthy people, and at some given point, unless you happen to have the right product that is ongoing and you can do it. But so many of these young, what they call these entrepreneurs, are not really entrepreneurs. They're just getting lucky. And what happens in their 30s when they have a mortgage and a house and two kids and they need to go to college and they're unhireable. And that's what I think that's destructive in the concept of today, thinking that everybody should be an entrepreneur. I believe that you can be an entrepreneur in somebody else's business. I mean, it's very simple. My son wants to open up a fund one day. So what does he do? He ends up going to college that I made him go to that he didn't want to go to. It's another story in itself. He ends up getting a job for this guy, Howard Lutnick, who's a CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. He works for him for 3 years. Then he goes to NYU to get his master's. Then he got offered from 5 banks, Credit Suisse, not the right bank to pick, but it's been a good experience. But he's getting that experience. Yeah. And I said to him, finally, he's 28 years old now. And I said, oh, so maybe when you're 35, you'll open up a fund. He goes, no, I'll wait till I'm 40. I got a lot more to learn. Because what I teach these kids is build a foundation that you can lean back on for the rest of your life. My daughter, she was a photographer. She graduated in Newhouse, up in Syracuse. Great photographer. Great editing. She's like, this will not be sustainable for the rest of my life, because she saw very quickly that people could edit on their phones and this, that, or whatever. So she ended up getting her law degree. So, and the way that I kind of got her into the mindset of the law degree, because she's really an artist, I said, I'm partners of a restaurant called Hutton Fish Club in New York City. It's wild, a great restaurant. And the waiters there are waiters to pay for their acting career. So I said to my daughter, you're a photographer who happens to be a lawyer that's paying for your passion. So you have all these people like, what's the big thing? Go for your passion. Yeah. Well, guess what? Your passion might not be able to make enough to sustain you for the rest of your life. So sometimes you actually have to get a job to cover your life and your passion. And that's something that I think a lot of people are mixing up. And the question is, on this 20-year-old and 30-year-old generation, what's going to happen when they're 40 and 50? Because you know what? I just turned 59. You got a little more tired. You don't have the energy. You might have the wisdom, but you don't have the energy. So the question that I put to some of these people that are doing this, okay, it's great. You're having a blast now. You're living your truth. All those key words that are thrown all over the place. But what are you going to do when the real responsibility kicks in? When it's not just you. And I hope that, people will have a good relationships, and they'll have partners, and they'll have wives or husbands or whatever works for them. And then they'll have families, and they'll, experience all the greatest things that I did with my kids growing up, which is really where the real rush comes in, right? But the question is that no one's thinking further in the future now. They're all thinking just
immediate
today,
money.
Am I happy today? Yeah. You know what? The greatest thing that ever happened to me, you talk about my career. So 2 of the greatest things that ever happened to me, my first 2 weeks of being on the trading floors in Chicago. My first thing was I went to this guy who was, the guy I was going to be working for, turned out to be a real mafia guy, I went there the first day. They come back in 2 weeks. They found his friend in the ditch. Okay.
Like real mafia.
Yeah, like real mafia stuff. So I walk into his office and I say to him, you know what? I'm going to be the best broker you've ever seen. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And he's like, David, just sit down and shut the fuck up. You could talk to people back then like that without them running out of the room being, oh, look what he said. So he says, shut the fuck up, And I'm like, he goes, you see that trading floor out there? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you see how exciting it is? You see the rush that it is? Like, yeah. He goes, one day it's going to be a job. He goes, one day you're going to walk in and you're not going to want to get spit on, and you're not going to want to get knocked on the head, and you're not going to want to deal with the pressure, and you're not going to be feeling well, and you are not going to want to do this. He says, but, he goes, this will afford you and your family a quite interesting lifestyle. And if you're good at it, you can do a lot of things with this. So if you look at the long term and realize that everything turns into a job, very few people skip their way to work every day. I'm envious of the people that do. Mm-hmm. A lot of musicians do, a lot of artists do. I love that. If you could do it, great. But the problem is that the majority of the people don't have that, So he gave me that advice. The other piece of advice I got was there was a guy there. He would look like Rip Van Winkle, great, red, crazy hair. Looked like he'd been there forever. And I was, 20-something-year-old kid. So this guy might have been younger than me now, but who knows, right? So he looks at me and he goes, I know who you are. Because I went very quietly because my father was on the board of the other exchanges in New York. And so I wouldn't, just do my own thing because I know who you are. He goes, listen to me. He goes, you're going to have the chance to get into the ring one day. He goes, and when you get into the ring, no one's going to care about who your father is. No one's going to care about where you went to school. They're just going to try to rip your throat out because that's what we do here. He goes, I will never have the chance to get into the ring. He goes, I've been working here for 30 years. I've been a clerk for 30 years. I'll always be a clerk for 30 years. He goes, so I'm going to give you some advice. He goes, watch everything. He goes, watch the people's faces. Watch the people's, how they breathe. Watch how the runner, runs from the desk to the pit. Is he running quickly? Is he running? When the broker, grabs a piece of paper, look at his eyebrow. Look to see if that broker is looking at the girl. Did he sleep with her last night? What's going on? He goes, look at everything. And take it in every day, and you'll be a great trader because you'll learn how to process the information. And from that day on, all through life, I look at everything. And that's why, we could talk about it too. When I went blind in my right eye and half my world disappeared, that really screwed me up. So what would happen is I would put in these interns in New York, and I would put them in the middle of the trading floor. For 2 weeks, I wouldn't talk to them. And I would get a call from either them or their parents. Like, oh, my kid's not learning anything. I said, really? And I would give this kid the same speech that this guy gave me. And all of a sudden, it opened up his eyes. Because if you start looking at life and you start looking at the world, literally everything, every moving part, and you take it all in, you're going to be quicker than everybody. You're going to understand where it's coming. You're going to be able to react faster. I was one of 17 traders that was brought down to Quantico to get drilled by the generals because they wanted to know how we thought so quickly with our own money, with that kind of pressure, and being able to screw up. I have a whole class on screwing up. People don't realize that maybe 60% of our trades, 50 to 60 to 70, were losers every day. But if you were upset with your screw ups, you never could do anything. So, I talk about that. But those were the two things, that this guy says to me, get used to it. It's going to be a job. So and by the end of it, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but you did it. And, but I still to this day think about that. If I could find that guy with the Rip Van Winkle guy and just thank him for that piece of advice, and that was life changing. Do you feel that attitude is lost? Yes. In a younger generation? Yeah. Well, the whole grit attitude is lost. Yeah. I mean, think about what would happen now. Think about this story. So when I got moved from being a runner to being a phone clerk, I was up in salary, and I hadn't been paid the difference in the salary in 7 weeks. By the way, what is the salary of? Oh, a phone clerk back then was $17,000, but it was big coming from where I was making $375. Right. So, but it was big, for me, it was So I find out the head office, and I call what I think is the secretary of the president of the company, and I call the office. And this guy picks up and he's like, hello. And I'm like, hi, I'm just looking. I haven't been paid in 7 weeks. I'd like to find out what's going on. He goes, meet me in the lobby of the Board of Trade at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So I'm like, okay. I'm going over to a little kid and I'm like, all excited. I'm going to get paid. This guy, this little bald guy, all right, David Powers. If you're out there, I'm still looking for you. Okay. I spent 9 years on the admissions committee in New York, hoping he would show up one day after what he did. Okay, so he calls me in, and I'm in the lobby, and he gets all these traders around me, and he starts ripping me apart. Who the fuck are you to call me? I'm the general. You're just some peasant here. You don't call me. I mean, he basically set me up to rip me to shreds. Okay. Because you asked for the salary that I deserved. Yeah. Right. And I mean, he goes, you are nothing. He goes, always remember that. You're just a freaking clerk. You don't talk to brokers that way. You don't ask them things. You just do what you do. Meanwhile, by the time I got back to the other exchange, my phone was ringing. It was my father saying, what the hell did you just do? I'm getting calls from 3 people in Chicago, that you just pissed this guy off. I'm like, I just asked for but you know what I did? I didn't go to HR. I didn't cry. I was like, that sucked. How do I get this guy back in time? Yeah. And I never did. Okay. But I sat on the admissions committee for 9 years, hoping that this guy would come up and go, you remember that guy that I go, well, he does sound like a fucking asshole, but still. No, he was. But you know what? But traders on the floor and the clerks, we'd rip each other apart all the time. But, the thing is, what you're losing in this generation is grit. Yeah. And it's not just the dealing with shit situations like that. Like even when you're talking about like the sit on the floor for 2 weeks and do nothing. Right. Everybody needs immediate. Right. Immediate. I need it now. Right. I need input now. I need teaching now, whatever it is. I need my food now. I need my everything now, right? Sure. It's like the now generation. Yeah, or what I like to say, the crystal generation. Yeah. Right. The crystal generation is simple. They look great, but they break easy. And you know what? I am there to help these kids. I'm on the grit and patience. Grit and patience, because what happens is that anything that comes fast and easy is never lasting. It just in anything, and that's something that I've realized when I was older. And I have a picture that I use in my lectures of me on the first day of the trading floor. I'm in my yellow jacket, my clerk jacket, and then I'm in a suit on the right. And my last day on the trading floor was a 30-year difference. And I said, the kid on the left thought he knew everything. And the guy on the right realized he knows nothing. Mm-hmm. And the more that you understand that you know nothing and every day you're learning, rather than, what everybody says, well, I know what I'm doing. Like nobody really knows what they're doing. The question is, can they do it without killing themselves or without destroying what they're trying to do? There's unique few, but Instagram and all these other, social media platforms are blowing things up so unrealistically. Like, I was on a friend of mine's boat. It was a 120-foot boat. And then he's got his Bugatti next to his boat. So I take pictures with it. And my hashtag was not my boat and not my Bugatti. I'm like, how about we all have to post that it's not ours? Yeah. So what's happening is that you're getting a whole generation that's thinking that, there's always one person or two people that knock the cover off. Well, it happens. It happens all the time. But you don't hear about the thousands of other people that are living in their parents' basement because
millions
now.
Yeah.
Because they took the time that they had to do. Oh, I had to follow my passion. I had to follow this. Listen, follow your passion, but give it time. It takes time. It's very hard when you're younger. And this is not an older guy talking. I'm telling you, I screwed up more than anything. I teach and I mentor off my screw ups, not my successes. Because everybody can talk about the successes. It's easy. But how did you get past the hard times? How did you get past when, we'll talk about 9/11, when literally like we're working next door to, the morgue is outside our building, crazy stuff. And that's what creates success. And what's happening now is that it's all being bastardized. It's all being made into, if you're not X, then you're a failure. And the whole definition of success is wrong. It's not about, I always talk about success has nothing to do with the amount of money that you have, the car you drive, or the clothes you wear. Success is knowing that when the shit hits the fan, people will turn towards you. That when the times are tough, that, you're the 3 a.m. phone call. When your kids or your friends have an issue, they can talk to you and know that their talk is secure and that you're not going to be, posting it or whatever. I've learned that when people lean on you, there is no better compliment, there is no better satisfaction, and that is success. Because I know some very wealthy people that are not successes. And I know some people have no money that are the most amazing successes in the world. And then, I know some, very wealthy people that have done very well. Like, a friend of mine that owns the Panthers, this guy, Vincent Viola, who I, represent on the Panthers, worth about $3.4 billion. You would never know it. He would walk down the street, he'd be in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, Teresa, his wife, no jewelry, no nothing, the kindest people that you've ever met.
But there's people that are worth nothing.
And have the Ferraris and the whole thing, These people are the kindest giving back people I've ever met. And you would never know it because he's a kid from Brooklyn that started off with nothing, and did it all on his own. And we'll talk about the 9/11 experience that I had with him. But it shows that people like them show that it can be done with class. It shows it can be done with statute and with compassion.
We're just going to take a quick break. Thank the longtime friend and sponsor of the show, the HubSpot Podcast Network. They have incredible podcasts. One of my favorites, one that you have to check out this month, is Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. Now, if you've ever noticed, the smallest changes always seem to have the biggest impact. On Nudge, you learn simple, evidence-backed tips to help you kick bad habits, get a raise, grow a business. The point is, every bite-sized 20-minute show comes packed with practical advice from these incredible entrepreneurs, behavioral scientists, and everybody in between. Nudge is fast-paced, but very insightful and a must-listen if you're a podcast fan. Make sure you listen to Nudge wherever you love to get your podcasts. Let's talk about some of those setbacks because, like you said, failures are what you learn from. You're dealing with lots of money in your career. You've had obviously personal setbacks, and not setbacks like 9/11, but things that you've screwed up.
Oh yeah.
Talk about some of those, some of the biggest screw ups, and also how do you deal with that shit? Okay,
well, let's talk about some of the screw ups. So we'll talk about my physical screw ups.
Yeah, so you can talk about those too. Those are outside of your control. Well, to a degree.
Well, to a degree. I'm the one that pulled the hanger.
Yeah.
So,
oh god. So
yeah, it's a whole story. So what happened was, so I wanted to become a board member of NYMEX. It was one of my goals, and I remember I was young. I spent a lot of time on all the crap committees, and people don't realize that, they all realize that. My kids woke up, I said, there was 15 years or 12 to 15 years of stuff that you didn't know I was doing because you were too young. I didn't just wake up one day and be on the board. So I ran for the board for my first time. And I remember I was running against this guy and he had very powerful friends. And they come up to me in the cafeteria and they go, "We want you to pull out."
You get bullied a lot at work, don't you?
Everybody did.
Yeah.
It was just, it was awesome. No, it was awesome. And then you became the bully.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't care. Like nobody can say anything to us as traders on the floor that will ever insult us, because we've called each other every name in the book and it just didn't matter. So they're like, well, you got to remember, it was a very tough group down there.
Yeah.
It was Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island.
Don't fuck around.
No. And I was a Long Island kid. I was easy bait. So they said, we want you to pull out. I'm like, I'm not pulling out. I'm like, you want to hear my platform? I'm like, no, we don't care. They said, well, we want you to know that you are going to get beaten badly. He says, but if you take it like a man, there'll be a time. He said, they think you're just too young. But if you take it like a man, and when we're ready, we'll support you. I got my ass kicked in that election. Like you would, it was a classic whooping. But I still had to walk down to the trading floor the next day in front of 1,000 people after losing that badly, and you're sending letters out, you're making speeches, you're calling every member. So the next year I run and I lose again, but by less. And then the next year I run and I lose by 4 votes. And then next year I run and I end up winning, and then I win 4 consecutive terms, and end up being on the executive committee. So, I could have taken those losses and been embarrassed by them. I could have taken those losses and said, I can't do this. I didn't take those losses. I take those losses as educational experiences. And if you can take a loss or a setback like that, and listen, you got to walk in, and I got very good at saying hello to people the next day is to be able to read them to see if they really voted for me or not. And I could tell if they didn't, then I worked on them for the next year. And I had worked on it for an entire year for that one election period. So what it really taught me was, that when you get your ass kicked, when I was a C student, so I got my ass kicked a lot. The joke is, be nice to the C students because they'll be your boss one day. Because some of the A students, no offense to the A students out there, but it's just read, write, regurgitate. But when you have a B and C student that, failed or this, that, or whatever, and then had to go and tell their parents and show them the report card, or if the progress report didn't get pulled out of the mailbox in time, during those days, that, we learned what it was like to learn how to fail and get back up and fail and, have to show up or have to look at people in the face after. That is the greatest gift that anybody can give you, and that setback of running for the board and still coming down to the trading floor and having to be there, I think was one of the best experiences of my life.
What happened to you? You said like other things outside of like career, like physical.
Well, a
lot of setbacks.
Yeah, well, setbacks. So I always had autoimmune issues. And then, I'm a 9/11 survivor. We were there that day, and we can go over that in a second.
I want to get into that after this.
Yeah. But so that got worse. So I have terrible body pain. So I'm in pain all the time. And what made it worse was then one day I'm out at a restaurant and I wore hard contacts, so I always had a problem with my right eye. But at the same time, I was fully right eye dominant from an issue I had with a kid. So I always had some eye issues. I put my finger in a glass of water. I put some water in my eye. It turns out there was bacteria in the water. I had a cut on the ulcer on my eye. I got a massive bacterial infection. I was in my basement for 2 months. I couldn't function because the pain was so bad from any kind of light. Then when that cleared up, I had to get a cornea transplant. So I get a cornea transplant and I take my shield off that morning and I can read a Lubriderm bottle. I'm like, oh, this is freaking great. I'm like so excited. I walk into my closet. There's a t-shirt that's hanging up. I pull the t-shirt off the hanger. The hanger spins around, snaps, hits me right in the eye. Okay. I end up catching, because things were coming out, with my t-shirt, calling downstairs to my wife at the time. They couldn't hear me. My son was going out for a lacrosse game. I ended up throwing my body on the floor because I realized that the garage was underneath where my closet was. They heard the house shake. They come running upstairs. They take me to the doctor. I end up having the cornea they found underneath the lid, my lens they found in the bathroom the next day. And then I had a 8-year period where I had 9 retina tears and I slowly went blind painfully to the point where, because they hit a couple of nerves, for about 8.5 years or 9 years. And that put me to my knees. And I'm just recently in the last year or two, thanks to some work that I did and one of the eye doctors, this guy, Dr. Dan from the Panthers, that helped me start using my left eye and processing everything better. So, you get your ass kicked like that, so then I had my physical pain from 9/11, my eye pain, I gained 70 pounds or 80 pounds. I just lost the 70 pounds this year, in the past year and a half. But this is what I talk to when I lecture and when I coach is that, when you're brought down to your knees, there's going to be a time where you're going to be down there. There's a bit about, you got to get right up. Sometimes it takes a little time.
Because you know what? Everybody who, teaches over entrepreneurial resistance, grit, perseverance, a lot of them have no physical issues. Right. They're fine. They're young. They're healthy. And it's already tough enough. Right. It's already tough enough if, God forbid, you have 8 years of debilitating eye pain. Right. You have chronic physical pain. Right. And you're going...
And you still have to show up.
And you you have to operate at an exceptionally high level.
Right. Like when I would go on CNBC, especially after the eye issue and Fox, and the lights were there. I mean, it was literally almost bringing me down to my knees because before I went fully blind, my pupil was stuck open. So the light sensitivity was just, and I'd be sitting there in those interviews and, you sometimes just see my head tilt a little bit or whatever. And I would get off and, I was on painkillers at the time just to handle it and things like that. Yeah. And even not getting addicted to the painkillers was a feat, because, when you're in that kind of pain for that long, you tend to, people tend to have problems. And I remember when I was with my pain management doctor one day, he says, well, either you got to go up or get off because it wasn't working. I said, I'll get off. And he's like, what? Nobody gets off, and I slowly got off and dealt with it. And, and then when I fully went blind about 2 years ago is when the headaches really started subsiding because the eyes stopped fighting each other all day. But when you have that kind of pain and still have to show up for speeches and still have to show up for lectures and make it look like nothing's bothering you, it really shows you what real backbone and grit is. And that's why, when I talk to the students or when I coach, with my coaching clients, I'm the guy that just tells it like it is. If you want a coach that sits there and just massages you and tells you how friggin' great you are all the time, I am not the guy. You want a coach that's going to say, okay, let's look at this for what it is. Let's look at reality. And it might hurt, and you might not like what you see and you might not like what you hear, but I will guarantee you once we work through this, that you will not only be a better individual, you'll be a better human being, you'll work better, you'll be a better family person, you'll be a better, thinker, because you're seeing the world for what it is. Because we all know when you stop seeing the world for what it is, you end up getting beat all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I think that I'm curious with the people that you work with right now, how delusional they are about their career, about their business.
Not so much delusional. Some of the parents, when they ask me to speak to their kids, they can be a little bit not looking at life the way it should be. But by the time I'm finished with them, they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. When I talk to them about building that foundation, to take your time. And I explain to them, if you take your time and you build that foundation, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, you're going to be rocking with all these other people. Yeah. Like, now what?
Well, I'm a huge, I've said this before. I do believe that if you take 10 years to build anything and not just build it blindly and not iterate and not learn, but if you progressively learn, build feedback loops for 10 years in anything that you're doing, you're going to achieve some measure of success.
Right. And if you don't achieve a measure of success of being your own boss or your own company, and listen, there's something to be said about being your own boss in your own company. There's also something to be said about walking out and not having to worry about things.
Also true, yeah.
And, like somebody that I know that was a boss of his own company said, no one ever told me that I was going to have to worry about all this stuff. I'm like, yeah. I said, it's more than just the ego of saying that you're CEO. But, you build that foundation over 10, 15 years, and people forget. If you're lucky, by the way, as I learned in life, you'll get older. Not everybody's guaranteed to get older. That's another thing people have to realize. So if you're lucky enough to age and to get older, and you're going to be in your 50s and your 60s, which when I was in my 20s looked ancient, right? But if you realize that there's a long runway in front of you, you have to prepare for that long runway. If not, you're going to have this great little runway here for 20 years of your life, and then you could spend 50 years of your life saying, now what? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where some of the younger generation is missing the point, and it's like somebody says to me, well, what are you doing to work out? Blah, blah, blah. And you should try this suit. You put it on for 20 minutes and you build it up and this, that, or whatever. And I go, no. They go, well, you should try it. I'm like, no. They're like, why? I said, because I made a decision. And they're like, what's the decision? I said, I will only do health-wise what I know I can do forever. I'm not going to do that suit forever. I'm not going to do X, Y, Z.
So why would it be different with your career, with your personal relationships? Like that should be the goal going into everything,
should be the goal. Right? That what can you do for the long term? And the real question is that, and I told you I sit on a lot of boards, and I'm the guy that says your baby's ugly if your baby's ugly. And the problem is that sometimes just because you have an idea, and it could be a great idea, it doesn't mean it's the right thing for you to do. It could be a side hustle. It could be something that you're doing. And if it then takes on, but people, this whole bit that people have right now where they have to be CEO of their own company. And I love it when I meet somebody, I'm CEO of my own company. Here's my card. I'm like, oh yeah, what is it? I'm pre-revenue. And my best friend's the CIO and this. I'm like, what do you do? He goes, well, we're figuring
Web3,
out
blockchain, AI, machine learning. Yeah.
And by the way, guess what? You are not going to compete with, I was just in this conference in France, Women in Tech. And, a friend of mine is a deputy director of innovation and investment for NASA. So I'm seeing some stuff that I am telling you right now, okay, that the companies out there are so far ahead of the game that, go work for one of those companies. Go work for one of those companies for 10 years. Learn everything that they know. And then if you figure out a new spin-off of that, good for you.
Yeah. But, which, by the way, is the highest rate of success for an entrepreneur. You work in an industry for 10 plus years and then you solve a problem. Yeah.
Right. You solve a problem. Then you go, wait a minute, now I've got all this massive information. Yeah. Okay. And I can do X. And that's where this whole entrepreneurship journey has been flipped on its ass.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, you're 20, do it now because now's the time to do it. I'm like, bullshit. Now's the time for you to learn. And why not learn from people that are doing it and can give you the best resources possible? Would you rather be in your basement trying to learn something and do something, or you rather work for one of these mega companies? Okay, and a lot of people give me pushback, on this, but I'm sorry. Okay, I work for a major company, learn everything there is. I tell people that go in like you own the place. I go, not with the attitude that you own the place, but go in and say, okay, this just happened. If I owned it, how would I have handled this? If this top person walked out on me today, how am I going to replace that person? And by the way, what intellectual property did this guy just take with him? Mm-hmm. How am I going to have to sue him? I have to do this. So I said, if you're a young kid, and it's so funny, I talked to my son and some other people, I'm like, well, what's going to happen if I do this for 10 years? They go, you'll be 35.
It's young as hell anyway.
Right. I'm like, yeah. You'll be 35. If you do this from 25 to 35 for 10 years and amass all that knowledge. By the time I was 40, I was on the executive committee of the world's largest exchange. I had turned down the vice chairmanship of the exchange. I had learned everything about the business thanks to that one guy that told me to learn everything every day. And it put me in a position that, there's so much that I could do with that. But if, and then there were traders that just went to the trading floor, they traded all day and they left when the bell rang. Well, there was nothing for them to do after that. But I looked at the trading floor and I looked at the board and all the committees as my school. And going back to what we said, work for somebody for 10 years. There's no shame in that. No. And not only that, what they're going to find, they're going to do a study in 20 or 30 years from now. They're going to find, I think like what you said, that all the people that spent the time to build the foundation, was patient, okay, ended up here. And all those entrepreneurs from Instagram are down here. And then, we have a whole new section of people like, how are we going to take care of them?
Yeah.
Because it's just not sustainable. And people don't look at sustainability anymore. And what I've seen is that, like, when I was younger, there was a company called Woolworths and Gimbals. One thing I noticed that every company that I thought that could never possibly go out of business, they went out of business. Apple could go out of business one day. There's a chance that, that slim, but it's possible. Some other new co comes out from China or whatever and does everything that Apple does at like 1/100th of the cost.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people are like, oh no, we're going to go there. And kids growing up on products today that they know and love and that they think that are invincible, they're going to find out it doesn't work that way.
Tell me about 9/11. What happened? How did this impact you? Because you were, like you said, you were down this around the corner, a block over. What happened?
Well, everyone has their own 9/11 story.
Yeah.
And what I always talk about is that it's like if you throw a stone into a calm pond and you see the ripples. Imagine where the stone lands as the towers, and the ripples are every street, every state, every country, coming out. So my story is that I had invented a trader's breakfast club. You paid a certain fee. You got free breakfast every day at Windows of the World. And it was awesome. You would start off your day. You would be looking at the Brooklyn Bridge. You'd have in your bagels and lox or whatever you want, reading the Wall Street Journal, which was very, very civilized, knowing that you were going to go down and get screamed at, spit on, and your head smacked all day. So I was going up for breakfast, and I parked in the South Tower, and there was an issue where there was something going on with the express elevator. And they're like, you got to take the local. I'm like, I'm not taking the local. You got to get off it. I think it was 56, cross over, then we'll go up there. Like, screw that. So I leave the building and cross the street, and the plane hits. So everybody I was going to meet for breakfast, died. Another 6 people that cleared through my clearinghouse were there for a meeting. They died. We lost about, I think, 27 people. So I'm in my office, and the first plane hits, and my father calls me. And he says, they think the Cessna hit the World Trade Center. So I go, hang on for a second. I go into the office next door to me. I come running back. I go, if that's a Cessna, it's terrorism. There's like 10 floors missing, or 12 floors missing. And then, then the reports come. And then he calls me back. And my father's never panicked a day in his life. And he starts screaming, get the fuck out of the building. They show the other plane coming over. Yeah. And if you see it, it goes right over our building. Because you had our building, Merrill Lynch, American Express, the World Trade Center. So then we started evacuating our building. And then we ended up closing the trading floor as the first building, we realized we're not going to reopen. The first building falls. We're down there. We're like running in front of the smoke, the whole bit up West Side Highway. Luckily, the smoke didn't catch up to me because I was a little bit of a head start. And then this guy, Vincent Viola, who was chairman of the exchange, he was 45 years old. I look at it now and imagine getting this phone call from the White House saying, world energy prices are going crazy. We need to figure out a way to reopen. So we didn't even know if the building was still standing.
He got that phone call as the after the first. Oh,
that night.
That night. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is like peak 9/11.
Oh, that
no
night.
One's flying anywhere.
No one's flying. No one can get
anywhere. No one knows what's going on.
Yeah, oil prices are going crazy.
They got to call that night.
Yeah, no, you got to call that night from the White House saying, listen, we have to stabilize world oil prices. And I was on the board at that time. So with this guy, Richie Schaefer, and Stu Smith, and I always say their names because I give them the credit for doing this. We do an emergency board meeting. We were able to get phone lines, attached, and we do a phone, it's first offsite meeting, compared to what COVID is now. We didn't have Zoom back then and all these other things. And they go down. They walk 65 blocks down to the World Trade Center to see if our building's still standing. And it turns out our building was blocked from American Express and Merrill Lynch, and it was a mess, but it was still standing. So Vinny, we end up going to the Palace Hotel at the time, and we get all the board members there. And Vinny, who's a West Point graduate and an Army Ranger, he ends up running this like a military operation. He puts me, that guy that they told me not to run against?
Yeah.
Okay, that beat me?
Yeah.
He put me with him. We hated each other. He says, you guys hate each other. I don't care. You guys are good at this one thing that I want you to do. Figure it out, work it out, just do it, right? So he really taught me a lot about leadership under pressure and under stress and strategic leadership. And, by his leadership and by the board doing what they did between laying lines, Vinny was up on the roof and there's, 5 inches of heating oil by his ankles because for the generators and all this other stuff. And because all our telecommunications were in the World Trade Center. So we had to redo everything. And we were the first exchange to reopen. I'm on that Tuesday. And we were secretly open in 9/11 for 3 months. So the building was burning outside. The smell was terrible. The morgue was outside our building. And what I arranged was with the ferry service was to pick up about 1,000 people every day, first thing in the morning on 34th Street, bring them down the river, up into the building. We had the building, corded off. People had to stay in the building. We had a 4-hour trading day. Got them out of the building and then went back up. But we were the first exchange to reopen. And it was quite an experience, but it showed that even in the face, and that's somewhere some of my illness came from because they said the air quality.
Of course,
you learn with the government, and I said this in the beginning of COVID, they do their best guess, and they're not really trying to be as nefarious as everybody thinks they are. But we had the things outside the building and the spinners, and the EPA, we literally have the memos. The EPA comes out that the air quality is fine. Well, the air quality
is not fine.
Which, if you really had a brain and we weren't so in shock by the smell alone, you would have known that, and then walking out every day and this white dusting on everything. So thanks to Vinny and an amazing board that he had around, which I was just one of many. We got the exchange up and going, and we brought all the traders. And I give a lot of the credit to the traders and the staff and the support people of NYMEX, because without the support people and the traders and the clerks and everything else who left their families, a week later to come back down to ground zero, then the smoke was there and the fire was there for 3 months. So we would watch these pieces that were being taken out that were just glowing, because the heat, was so strong. And I was one of 5 people that had a pass from the mayor to leave the vicinity and go right up to, where the towers were. I kind of wish I didn't have that pass now. But the things that you saw, but what you realize is that you never looked up at the wreckage. It was flat because everything was just turned to dust. One of the firemen said that he's never seen concrete turn back to its original form. And then like about a year later, a friend of mine called me up. She was so excited. They found a bone fragment of her father. And they literally buried the bone fragment. I mean, I went to 17 or 18 funerals, and but that was a huge definition of my life, because first, before what happened there is that my mother at 55, when I was in my 30s, now I'm 59, she really looks young. She came down with lung cancer as a non-smoker, and she died just on her 56th birthday. So here it is that my mother passed away, early. My friends died early. Then I have the eye issue. So, I always say that I am looking at the world more clearly through one eye than I ever did with two.
Yeah, you've gone through a lot. So,
but there was 2 ways I could do it. I could either gone through a lot and I could just let it beat the shit out of me, become a victim, right? Or I could go through all this and say, how can I make a difference? How can I take all this that I've learned, and all this strength that I've gotten from this and make a difference in people's lives? And we do that by, I'm on the board of Junior Achievements, where we see 70,000 Broward County kids a year for workforce development and financial literacy. I said I do a lot of charity work. I do, the mentoring. A lot of young kids, I don't charge at all for their mentoring. I mean, there are some kids said to me, how do we pay you? I said, when you're 75, tell your grandkids you met some guy that made a difference. And don't even worry about remembering my name. Just that's not what I want. But what you learn through those experiences when you are in, I said this to somebody the other day. When I walked into my mother. She was still alive. I whispered into her ear, it was time to go. I walked back out. Her husband at the time calls me back in. A minute later, she was gone. And when you feel the pain of death to that extreme, where it brings you to your knees from someone that died in a untimely death. And then when you watch those buildings go down and at the time I thought there were a lot more people in there, but whether it was 1 or 50,000, and you feel that kind of pain. And then the pain that I was in physically, emotionally, and headache wise, when you've dealt with the kind of pain levels I have, you realize how great not being in pain is. And you realize that life is fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that I've got into some arguments with people at dinner that they'll go, growing old sucks. Wrong person to say that in front of them. I'm like, no. I go, growing old can be painful, it can be frustrating, it can be exhausting, it can be a whole lot of things. I said, dying sucks. So once you realize that, and you've seen death the way that I have, it opens up a whole new vast way of looking at the world. It looks at, like, I can find joy in almost anything. I can go, I tell people, and somebody is like, I want to go see this. I might not want to go see it, but I want to spend time with that person. I'll enjoy seeing that person being happy, and I don't have to enjoy the event as much as that person did, but I'll enjoy the enjoyment of them. So those things have defined me in such a unique way. And being in pain and then coming out of the eye pain, I call it being pulled out of the matrix. I kind of see the world for what it is now, both good and bad. But that's why, in my coaching and in other areas, I just tell it like it is, and people find that it's very refreshing. It might be a little painful at times, but it's like what I say, if you want somebody to really pull you through to the next level, well, I'm your guy. If you want somebody to pat you on the back and tell you how great you are just for showing up, wrong person.
Has the life you lived impacted how you look at work?
Yes. But not in a way that a lot of people think, that work less and enjoy life more.
Okay.
I think that it's a work-life balance is important. I was very lucky that, and not that many people are, the exchange closed pre 9/11 at basically 3:30. So even with the committee work and everything else, I was out at a relatively early hour, except for the fact that the markets were open all night and you were kind of freaked out about that. But I tell this story. It's a funny story. When I said to my son, Very few fathers have done for their kid what I've done for you. So what happened is that, and this is another thing people have to learn. When you're working for a company, learn everything about the culture. Learn how they work, how they do things, how they put things off, how they procrastinate, learn everything. So we're in a board meeting because Goldman Sachs stole our boats after a month of us using them in 9/11. They offered them twice as much as what we were going to pay. So we had to have everybody walk through Ground Zero every night to get to the closest subway. So we're at this meeting and the chairman and the vice chairman say, we're going to do a temporary close of 2:30. This way nobody has to walk in the dark through 9/11. Now I sit there and I'm like, well, I just came back from London because I did the international expansion. And I'm like, the guys in London would really like to get home an hour earlier. And you know what? Condensing the trading floor day would be good. And why don't we take out the word temporary? Because I knew they never revisited anything.
Yeah.
So we take the word temporary out. And I said it this way because I knew I wasn't worried about London or anything else. I just knew that my son was a big lacrosse player. And if I got out at 2:30, I could make every one of his games. So I say to him, let's take the word temporary out. And to this day, crude oil still closes at 2:30 in the afternoon. That's when the closing bell is.
That's so fucking funny.
But it goes back to what I talk about. NYMEX politics was a contact sport. And if you could work your way through the NYMEX politics system, you really know how to work your way through a corporation. And people need to understand, like it or not, there's politics everywhere. And what I do with mid-level employees and even CEOs and things like that, we work with how to deal with the politics. Now, politics, it's a landmine now it's never been this bad. Because God forbid you look at somebody the wrong way, you say something wrong.
Yeah.
It's like what I tell some of these younger people, I go, sometimes your boss is just having a bad day, and I don't like the way you looked at me. I didn't like this tone. I'm like, that's where the grit comes in.
Yeah.
You can either go home and cry about it or say, okay, and by the way, if you didn't hand the project in the first 3 times wrong, he might not have been, or she might not have been mad at you to begin with. So it's a very hard navigation that a lot of these people are doing now. But 9/11 and my mom and the pain that I was in completely redefined how I look at life and work. Like, you have to enjoy life. Don't work to the point where you're not enjoying your life. But also realize that if you're taking too much time off, that there's going to be people in the world that are going to be up your butt, a lot more motivated you, a lot more, working harder. And in European countries and in China and everywhere else, they're not about play right now.
Well, Europe is a lighter workload.
Well, that's because they have their siestas and everything else. And France, God forbid you call somebody on the weekend.
Or Friday, Friday at all, really.
Right. Yeah, it's true. But there are always people within whatever you're doing that will be hungrier than you.
Yeah.
And that's fine, as long as you don't say, why didn't I get this position, or why didn't I do this? Well, maybe the person that says, listen, I'm not as worried about the work, life balance. I want more X. And you have to respect both sides.
What about the flip side of that? What about somebody that is doing too much? Too much is, how do you define too much? But they're doing so much at a young age, and they don't have any time for relationship. They leave the girlfriend.
I think they're missing out. The most important thing,
the hustle culture.
Yeah, the hustle culture. Listen, as I said, I've experienced a lot of death.
Yeah,
and I don't know one of those people that was thinking just before they died how much money they had. I remember I said to somebody once, I was going to take my friend's boat around Long Island. He was taking the boat out. And he goes, but you're going to miss the day of trading. I said, well, I realized that after 9/11, if I get the chance to do something that I've never done, I'm going to do it. So I come in the next day and I'm like, how was it? I go, oh, it was amazing. I also learned something. If I get the chance to do something I've already done, but I really want to do it, I'm going to do it. So, at the end of the day, you know what? I have over time made a lot of money. I've spent a lot of money, made a lot of money. But the key thing to me is the relationships that I have with people. And that is becoming a lost art, to truly having intimate, and I don't mean on a sexual basis. I mean,
business, friendship, peers.
Business, friendship, peerhood.
But COVID screwed all that up.
COVID killed it. But the question is, how do we get that back?
Yeah.
The problem that we have now is that when I closed the trading floor, I made a speech the day we finally closed the trading floor for good. I got up there and I said, remember, we were the ones that ripped each other apart face to face. We had a policing committee called the floor committee. And it was a $5,000 fine and a 2-day suspension if you hit somebody. And some people,
it's like hockey.
And some people did the math, and they're like, "Hey, I need the time off, and I'm going to get this guy." Like there was one fight that I had that I just meeting this guy for the board, and he was an ex-linebacker of Penn State, and I pushed him this way to get to a trade. I went, bam! And I looked down, and he had fallen 3 steps and hit his head against the rail. And he's a big guy. He comes up, and he is bright red, and he is ripping me apart. He's calling me and they got 2 guys holding him back, and I got 2 guys holding me back, and I'm ripping him apart. He's ripping me apart because I'm like, I say to the guy next to me, go, whatever you do, don't let me go.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, why? Because if I get close, he's gonna freaking kill me.
Yeah.
So we end up getting thrown off the trading floor. We got a $2,000 fine, right? But by the time we hit the doors of the trading floor, he looks at me and goes, where do you want to go for lunch? I'm like, I don't know. And we just hung out all day because we could have these rip-roaring fights down there and not take it personally. And when the fight was over, it was over, and it was awesome. And that's what I taught in my classes too. Like you can have differences. You don't have to be so polar opposite that you need to hate each other. You can respect the fact that I don't agree with you on any level, but which
is actually a super healthy relationship to have.
Which is a super healthy relationship. This whole bit about one side or the other on any topic, whether it be religion or politics or, the Nets versus the Knicks or whatever. It's like we've come down to a world now where people got mean during COVID because they got behind the keyboards of social media, and everyone's a big shot behind the keyboard. And that's what I was saying about when we closed the trading floor. When I ripped somebody apart, if somebody came at me, I don't think they were ever worried about me hitting them, but I was really worried about like this one guy that everybody was always scared. And I was a new trader in the ring, and he comes up and he gets right in my face. He does this whole Fu Manchu thing. And again, I got beat up a lot. So, and he goes, and I'm like, you know what, Neil, if you're going to hit me, do it now, and he looks at me, and goes, he goes, you're okay. It just walks away. And nobody ever messed with me again after that, So, but that's important.
I love that. If you were going to give some closing wisdom to the audience, I know you've given a lot, but what are some sort of takeaways, or actually even outside of that, what are things that we didn't go into? Because we went into a lot.
Yeah,
but
I think some of the things that the closing advice that I would give is that every day is a good day, period. A bad day is when you don't come home, or someone you loved didn't come home and didn't make it through the day. And if you can realize that every day is a good day, find something out of it. I remember the best advice I got was a friend of mine who was going through the 12 steps. And I brought him in to share my office, and we were sharing an office. And I remember at 10 o'clock in the morning, I go, this day sucks. And he ripped me apart. And he goes, what do you mean this day sucks? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. You've written off the whole day? And I'm like, well, he goes, maybe 11 o'clock things are going to be better. Maybe 1 o'clock things will be better. He goes, David, I take life one day at a time right now. He goes, you can't take it 1 hour at a time? And you know what? There were 2 things of that. One, it was a great thing. But what we're happening now is that people are too afraid to tell friends the truth. Mm-hmm. And that is a problem. If you really love somebody and you're really there for somebody and you really care, don't be too afraid to tell them the truth, because that's what it's all about, and be there. And the one takeaway that I've learned through all this business and the money that I've made and the relationships that I've made is that at the end of the day, a good relationship is better than a good dollar.
Amen. Where should people go? Like, where do you want to send people? Social, website? Yeah,
so social media. On Instagram, I'm David Douglas Greenberg.
Okay.
DAVID, Douglas and Greenberg. And then David Douglas Greenberg is the website.
Okay.
That's my strategic advising website, or Greenberg Capital. And let's see. And then Twitter, which I don't really use often, is Greenberg Cap, GRE.
We're going to get your socials back up and go.
So happy to do all that. But the key thing is that, if you're looking for someone to really sit down with you.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So really highlight. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what should they be asking you to do for them? What do? You sit on boards? You advise their companies?
I sit on boards and I advise companies, but also on the coaching end.
Yeah.
I coach some pretty powerful people that need somebody that's not just going to say yes all the time.
Okay.
Which
is everyone, by the way, but
right.
Yeah.
If someone's looking for someone who will say it like it is, listen, I can motivate anybody to get to the next level. But the key thing is you have to be honest with yourself. And it's not about the rah-rah. It's about, okay, let's get this grit. Let's get it done. It's going to be tough. And when you get your teeth knocked out, I'm going to be there for you, getting you back up and moving to the next level. Because those are the people that make it. You know, and I've seen so many of these coaches out there, and it's just about the rah-rah and the this, and take this format and read my book. I don't have a book. I wrote a book. It sucked. I didn't put it out there. Okay. But I was honest enough to say this sucks. Yeah. Right. But, you know, the way that I coach is just, it's grit, it's there, it's truth. And it's like, let's just get this stuff done.
Last question I ask everyone. You've had multiple seasons to your life, a lot of success. At this point in your life, how do you define success? What does it mean to you?
How do I define success at this time in my life? Success is making a difference in people's lives, period. Whether it be my friends' lives, my family's lives, the charity work I do. As I said, I sit on the, as a strategic advisor for the Panthers, I sit on a lot of boards. So I sit on the Junior Achievement boards. I sit on the United Negro College Leadership Board. I sit on the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival board, the Riverwalk board, all these things. But I'm doing it never about the ego. I could care about that, but how many people's lives can I change? And there's a great scene in one of the Batman movies where the Flash was with them, and he goes, in the Flash, he goes, okay, the Batman's like, I need your help. And the Flash goes, no, I was just here to hang out with the guys. Yeah. And he goes, go over there and save one of them. And all of a sudden, the Flash goes and saves one of them. And then he goes, oh. And then Batman goes, okay, go do another one. He goes back and goes back. And then the Flash goes, oh, and then he gets it. He gets how good it felt by being productive and to help somebody. And once you get that feeling under your belt and you realize what a rush it is to have some kid, because everybody can mentor. Don't give me this crap. I haven't done enough. I haven't done this. Everybody can mentor somebody. Mm-hmm. And if people take the time out to get out of their own head once in a while and realize that they can mentor other people, not only will they feel good about it, but they're going to learn enough about themselves, and they're going to be better at business by learning about what they are now telling the next generation. Because, we have a next generation of future leaders that will lead this country. And it is our job to get the message across of how to succeed with grit, being tough, maybe being not so sensitive, because the world doesn't care. The rest of the world's not going to care if your feelings are hurt, and how to get stuff done.